Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bob Ingram. I'm a financial planner here at Center for Financial Planning. And as a comprehensive planning firm, we recognize that paying for college education is one of the most important goals for parents and grandparents alike. After all, this is still one of the largest investments that you'll make. And as college admissions have evolved and the way different financial aid awards are offered, planning and paying for college involves so many different components. And really, our goal for this session is to share some strategies to help you develop your family's plan for finding the right schools and making the most cost-effective investments for your students' educations. And we're very excited to have Heidi King join us from College Inside Track. And before introducing Heidi, just a couple of really quick housekeeping notes that in the interest of keeping within our allotted time, we'll not be able to take questions during the session, but we really do encourage questions. And if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to your planners or contact us at the center. And at the end, we'll have a few different ways to not only contact the center, but also to contact Heidi as well. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Heidi King. Heidi is a college consultant focused on education and partnerships. Heidi's first career actually was an airline pilot, and as a pilot of 20 plus years, it's taught her how to manage important projects in time-sensitive situations, arriving at the destination safely, on time, and efficiently. And she's really applied those same skills when helping her two boys find their right college fit, and now does the same thing, helping thousands of families in her education role with College Inside Track. Heidi is a graduate of the University of Illinois and lives with her husband in the Chicagoland area. So with that, Heidi, welcome. Glad to have you.
Bob, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about something that is a real milestone for students, but families alike. And I do appreciate the opportunity to really talk about some things that we have seen go on in a more current landscape for college admissions. So we don't want to talk about that today, but if you're unfamiliar with College Inside Track, we have been helping families navigate a college search for the better part of 18 years now. Love my job. When we work with families, it's always to find right fit schools. And we define right fit as right academic fit, right social fit for the student. But we really want to work with a financial fit for the families. And that is also how Bob and the team at the center are helping you as well, right? And if you're on the call right now, it's because you have a student in college about to do this. So the whole point of having me here is to reduce the stress. And I'm going to pull back the curtain on some of the things that we see in admissions. And I think one thing that has changed for sure is let's talk a little bit about how much has tuition increased since 1994, right? Bunch of decades, we know it's gone up. Public institution increase in tuition is 213%. Private schools even higher at that 415%. But I tell you what, I get to love my job. I get to meet with kids every day and families talk about colleges. The schools that your kids are bringing up are sometimes higher than those averages, right? My alma mater, the tuition is up over 500%. Right by you, University of Michigan, up over 1,000%. The highest that we see tuition nationwide increase is UConn, up over 1,300%. But how does this also matter to us? Well, it matters because it's costing us a ton more to go to schools. This is a slide for 1 year tuition, room, board, fees, total cost of attendance, right? And I don't know about you, but state schools there at the bottom, University of Minnesota, UT Austin, Berkeley, those are state school pricing. So the average cost for a flagship state school, if you're in state, will typically cost a family more than $30,000 a year. UVA, the largest that we see, is over $44,000 per year. So that's why it's just important to kind of go through and be a little bit more strategic about how we are planning for college and trying to think about this a little bit earlier in high school. So we have a little bit more runway. 3 key points to the search. Again, right academic fit for your student. What kind of a learner are they? Are they competitive? Are they collaborative? A little bit of room to find more majors to study. A social fit. Where do they want to live for 4 years? What is that vibe? How do they want to find the friends and stay at school? And then lastly, like a 3-legged stool, financial fit. If one leg is missing, this is not successful. So important to think of that as like a 3-sided equal parts of a triangle. Okay, little quiz here at the beginning. Another thing that I think is surprising for families to know is how challenging it is for kids to find the right fit school the first time. One way that we can talk about that is, what do you think is the national transfer rate? What's the percentage of kids that transfer that one time? Well, the national transfer rate sits at 38%, right? And that is high. I can't believe like that is such a high 38% amount. And emotionally, there's going to be a cost to that because your child is not happy. I am the parent of 2 boys. I am lucky if I get that phone call once a week on Sundays. But if your child is unhappy, they're either going to go dark, no phone calls, or they are going to call you all the time. So there's emotional cost to picking out a wrong school. But there's also a financial implication as well. The average cost, if you have to transfer once, adds $14,000 to your degree. The analytics behind that are, if you made a poor choice the first time, you are at risk again. And what happens is the kids come home from school. Maybe they reset, maybe they go to community college, and then they attempt to go to another school, maybe as a junior, so you're 20 years old. And guess what? 45% of that original group will transfer again, and adding the cost to the degree by 24,000, right? And that's simply because it's really hard to graduate on time if you're transferring twice. And if you transfer at all, it's often that the grades aren't good enough to have a class transfer. And so it just takes the child longer and they're not in the workforce earning. So that's how we come up with those numbers. We got to work with about 250 kids last year, and through the 18 years of College Inside Track helping families through the entirety of the process, we are seeing a lot of trends. And I tell you what, admissions has gone bonkers in the last 5 years. The Supreme Court, big changes. FAFSA, legislatively, huge changes. Admissions changes because of different things on the screen. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. How to use the FAFSA and the CSS profile to garner money. The selectivity list, colleges, applying to colleges gets larger and larger. The amount of people that are applying every year through the roof applying to schools. There is an issue with grade inflation that has been showing up. The most common grade right now is an A-. When I went and applied to school, it was a C+. Grade inflation. And it really is a shift towards using early decision as part of a leverage to get into schools. So we're going to talk a little bit about all those things, but for families that are trying to figure out on the front end how to apply strategically for school, they have to figure out what they want to pay. And colleges make it extremely difficult to figure out, and they're not transparent on their costs. So to launch this process, let's talk a little bit about the types of financial aid that we see. So financial aid comes in different forms. So you get need-based, based on a family's household income. That's typically launches with the federal government, grants and scholarships as well through the universities that you're applying to. There's also merit-based scholarships. Hey, that's not has anything to do with what a family makes. You can make $1 million and still get merit-based scholarships. We're going to talk about both of those today. There is also the opportunity to get a loan. That is a much deeper discussion. I have a whole different presentation about that. If you have any questions about loans, we are not going to go too far into that today. But I want to tell you a little bit about the FAFSA form and how it is used and why we're even suggesting people do it in the first place. So what is used on the FAFSA? Well, heck, it is actually a student-driven form, but it is owned by the student. But there are individuals that matter on this form. Assets and income are driven from the parents, but also the students. And it's different. A parent's income is the biggest contributor to the outcome of the FAFSA. It is the largest portion of the formula, and that is because parents make a different amount of money than a child, right? So their income being assessed up to 47% is going to be the biggest driver of whether a family is going to be need-based or not. It is not their assets, parents' assets. Parents' assets are only assessed at 5.64% in the formula. Students' assets and income, they are a factor, but because a student doesn't make very much, that 50% does not bubble into the formula very often. Their assets, sometimes, right? Sometimes a child might have a savings account that is labeled specifically for them. Could be your financial advisor has an UGMA or an UTMA account, the Uniform Gifts to Minors. It's basically a savings account for the benefit of. Those do factor into the FAFSA formula. Now, it used to be that grandparents factored in a way. They don't. They're completely off the FAFSA formula. The FAFSA was simplified through legislation. Those questions about outside gifting, often through grandparents, is no longer factored in. This is a fabulous opportunity to kind of talk to your financial planners for generational wealth planning. Grandparents care deeply about the education of their kids. The good news is your gifting does not bubble up into the formula. Grandparent 529s no longer show up. So again, questions about that, lean into Bob or one of the team members.
And that's a great point, Heidi, just a second, is that it changes the way you may strategically use those kinds of savings. Oftentimes we'll have conversations with parents and grandparents as to, well, where do I pull funds from? What types of accounts? And it used to be you have to think anything from the grandparents should be later in the student's college life, because by the time they get to junior or senior year, those dollars would not show up because they're numbers for the last couple of years for financial aid in the FAFSA would be 2 years behind. So that way, if they're
Yes.
only using those dollars at the end, it was okay. Now it opens up the doors to using those really throughout the entire college years, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Bingo. You don't have to wait till the end. Feel free to gift. It doesn't come in the formula, and it doesn't hurt the child to have a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle contribute through a 529. Not at all anymore. Awesome. That's a good point. And there's just so many confusing parts of the FAFSA, right? It used to be that parents back in the day, a child could become more independent. It is extremely hard for a child to be emancipated for the FAFSA anymore. So understand there's just some drivers to this form, and we can be a little bit more strategic. The FAFSA form typically is filled out with a ton of errors. We hope that the simplification will be better. Last year, not so much. It was a huge bust. But I want to talk a little bit about the errors that we do see When families report their income, their assets, they tend to over-report. The two biggest mistakes that we see on the FAFSA, well, first of all, don't have your child fill this form out alone. It is the ownership for them, but this is really a form that a parent should have a significant help with doing and filling out. When they ask about your assets, do not include your top qualified retirement accounts. What are those? So anything that is a 401k. If you have something from your school system, if you work for the school system, like a 403b, qualified retirement account, don't include that when they ask for assets. Don't include an IRA, an inherited IRA, and don't include cash value of a life insurance. All right, those are ways that you sabotage your own money that you could be getting. Also, an asset is not your primary home. Don't include the value of that. If you have a rental home, vacation home, you do have to include that. Some of the changes that were in the simplification have made college more expensive for us. So clearly, the ability for the legislators to actually know the impact of this form was not fine-tuned. And they have announced via the Department of Education that this form is going to be delayed again this year. So if you have a senior in high school who is applying, the form is delayed. If you are a student in college or grad school, the form is delayed. It will not be coming out October 1st. There will be a soft launch. The form is allegedly going to be available, they said this last year, December 1st. Okay, stay tuned. If you get our family newsletter, these are kind of information that we do monthly churn out. We'll keep you up to date on the FAFSA simplification for this year. Some of the changes that were enacted, that if you have a small business, it used to have an exemption. Small business was 100 employees or less. There is no exemption anymore. We hope that will be corrected for this year's form. We will know more October 1st. If you have families, as divorce is part of your family structure, the parent that fills out the FAFSA is who contributes more, who provides more material support, not just simply where the child lives. It is really more complicated than that. Who provides more material support. It used to be that we benefited if we had more than one kid in college. We have lost that discount. Many families, actually more than 65% of families have a student and a sibling in college. We don't know why. Again, the federal government made that part of the simplification. But multiple kids don't share the FAFSA outcome anymore, so we have lost a multiple kid discount. But do know there are real reasons for a family to fill out the FAFSA. This is not a throwaway form for any family, even if you find that you are not going to benefit from need-based assistance. And that is because this form gives you the ability to get the student loan. That student loan is ownership in the process, right? $5,500 your freshman year, and the only way for you to get that loan is by filling out the FAFSA. Also, throughout the years that we have been working with families, we see that the FAFSA also demonstrates a higher number. That demonstrates your ability to pay. So there is a strategic thought process between, filling out the FAFSA. We know you might not benefit because you make too much, but it may benefit you in admissions for the colleges to know that. Another quiz here. You don't need to put in an answer, obviously, but this is on demand. But think about this, okay? When we meet with families, they do want to be strategic and not overpay for school. So we're talking about what is potentially the least expensive path. And there are common misperceptions about what that looks like per student. Because, hey, any of those questions can be the least expensive path, right? It depends on your family's circumstances. It depends on the student's resume that they have built, their grades, their test scores, what they've been involved in. But we do know that if you choose a wrong school, the first time, a transfer will add to the cost. So we need to ditch the old way of thinking about college. Out of state and in state, and one perceived as less expensive does not suit us anymore. Really think about it as what is a flexibly priced school and what's an inflexibly priced schools, because that can be in state and that can be out of state. Often the key to that is the admission statistics and how friendly they are with, are they extremely selective or not? It has nothing to do with in-state and out-of-state anymore. It is far more based on their flexibility priced and the admission statistics. So we're going to switch a little bit towards scholarships. And when I meet with family, I would say that it is often one of the questions that families are sinking and asking because they really don't want to leave money on the table. But we need to kind of retrain where we're looking for scholarships, because there is definitely, for the return of investment on your time, a better place than another. I would say often families are trying to apply for large scholarships that happen nationwide, or they are applying to smaller local scholarships, which are wonderful, and you have a higher chance of getting them from a bank, from an employer, from a Rotary, from your school. Your school counselor should have a list of local scholarships, right? Here's the deal. They typically are awarded in about $250. So congrats, you've bought a book, right? A national scholarship that you're applying over Google searching scholarships, you have to apply to between 50 and 80 random scholarships to win an award on average of $500, right? Honestly, I told my kids, just mow a couple lawns, right? Get a job, do something like that. The ability to win those scholarships, the amount of time it's going to take your student to write the essays, form the applications, and the arguments that it may cause, those are not the most strategic ways to find scholarships. But you know what is? Your list. Figuring out the schools that see your student as the kind of student that they want on campus, they will entice you with scholarship dollars from the school. And that is the best way. Why? Because those are typically renewable scholarships, multi-year scholarships on the front end from applying to the right schools. But here, there's not a magic rainbow for this. Families ask, where's that list? There's not a list. It's a ton of research that goes into knowing what schools. So we're going to hear a little bit of a recipe card for how to do this yourselves. Does the college need to offer merit at all? Because some don't. Some school that's super selective, 20% admit rate or less, no, they've got to line out the door of kids that want to go there, like Northwestern University, right? On average, less than 5% of the kids will get a merit scholarship. That school costs over $90,000 to go there. That merit scholarship that the average kid is getting is about $5,200. So again, not moving the needle very much. What you're looking for is schools that do give out merit. Admissions numbers that are 50%, 60%, and north of that, ding, 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 those are the schools that give it out in the first place, okay? State school, private school. Then your child, do they have grades and test scores from the last admissions class that are typically the top 25 and 33%? That's another indicator that your child may get a merit scholarship. Is your child doing things that the college values, their extracurricular talents? It can be music. It could be, yes, theater, arts. It could be sports for sure. It could also be choices in other parts and pieces of how they're spending their time. What are their talents? How are they spending the time? Do the colleges value that? That's another way that they will show in a merit award that they want you to come there. And being some sort of interest, geographically interesting, demographically interesting. Colleges, even with the Supreme Court, do still care about having a wide variety of kids on their classes. And I tell you what, you look on any school and they love to talk about, we have kids from this many states or this many countries. So sometimes just applying to schools that are outside of our little micro region or our region will garner you out of state scholarships. All right, so let's talk a little bit about this recipe card of how we see our students getting money. Our class last year of over 250 kids earned over $25 million of merit scholarships. These are typical ways that we know that they're getting the money, because sometimes it actually is listed as an out-of-state scholar, a border state scholar, right? So interacting with the school, that's demonstrated interest. Living out of state, we mentioned. Those good grades on your transcripts, right? A little bit of rigor can matter. Take an extra AP class. A letter of recommendation from your teacher. Big tip there, don't ask too late. At the end of junior year is a perfect time. Some students, my son got turned down from one of the teachers because she only took 25, right? You can't be like 33 on the list, so ask early. ACT, SAT, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Many colleges still give out merit. Even if they're test optional for admissions, their merit could be different on a different ACT. Auburn is a school where a 29 might earn you $8,000, but if you get a 31, $15,000 per year renewable scholarship, right? Because it comes from the school. So yes, the ACT and SAT can still matter. This college is a FAFSA and a CSS profile school. So filling out that forms garner you impactful scholarships. Dayton is like that. If you visit Dayton, demonstrated interest, and you fill out the FAFSA form, which you should, even if you make too much money, it gets you a renewable scholarship of $4,500 per year, right? Again, we do not want to miss scholarships. So that is another reason that we fill that form out. The essay with test optional landscape, holistic mission, admissions, those so important. It is not a check the box throwaway moment. Take the time on the essay. That is one of the things that we pay deep attention to. We spend about 3 to 5 weeks with our student doing the essay one-on-one. Super important and can show up in your merit scholarships. So let's talk a little bit about some tips here. Understand that how you apply to school can make a difference in the success of your admissions, because there are early opportunities ahead of regular decision where earlier the better for merit and earlier the better for the competition, right? So it's so important to understand what an early decision is compared to an early action. Some of these get so confusing for families, but you only have one early decision. Use it strategically. If you apply to a school that's too selective, it won't move the needle because everybody they know wants to come there. We really see early decision helping a little bit more at a tier 2 school rather than just the Ivy Leagues. Schools like Notre Dame, schools like Georgetown, Tulane, that can make a huge difference statistically. The analytics show that some colleges, you're more likely to get in, but understand, don't use it if you haven't run the net price calculator, because it may, at the end of the day, it is binding. just understanding how much more challenging it has become for families with acceptance rates going through the roof. We probably know Stanford is difficult to get into. But did you know sometimes that the state schools are as challenging? University of Texas, Austin only accepts 6.4 students. University of Tennessee, Knoxville used to be upwards of 80% acceptance rate. Last year, it went down to between 28 and 32. So sometimes the acceptance rates are challenging at the flagship state schools, which are really, really, really surprising for so many families. That last slide is also talking about grade inflation. We often feel like our students have done really well if they're getting those A's. But when you heard my statistic earlier that the average grade is like an A- or a B+, here is your competition. The average GPA of University of Michigan, almost a perfect GPA, right? University of Virginia, it's over a 4.0. University of Tennessee, Knoxville used to be about a 3.0. Now it's a 3.66. Your competition also has grade inflation. So sometimes having a test to show as another anchor for how smart the kids are and how qualified they are and how they're ready for college can really help with admissions. Purdue University actually waitlisted over 40,000 kids 3 years ago when they were test optional. So here's the thing. They went back to test required. It is really very much in flux. There are absolutely schools that are test optional, but sometimes the test scores can make a huge impact on the acceptance because these big brand schools, they need more than to just see the 4.0. And sometimes they need more just than seeing a great test scores. Passion projects, things that are interesting that the kids are involved in can make such a difference in holistic admissions to see everything, all the different parts and pieces that can go into acceptances so they can evaluate what kind of student you have. Please understand that we also are aware that families and kids very often get favorite schools. Often they are the big brand schools, sweatshirt schools, sometimes we call them. But admissions here is really a match to be made, not a prize to be won, right? Searching for only big brand schools will cut your student off potentially from a right fit academic school or a right fit social school or a right fit financial school that you are not aware of. Another quiz to speak about grade inflation and really the test inflation. In 2002, there were 134 perfect ACTs. How many perfect ACTs do you think showed up in 2022? 2,542. It really is true that the kids are working so hard on these tests. They are just part of getting into schools these days. Tip number 4, this could be my last tip slide. Understand that testing can still benefit you, right? And sometimes it's even not the score, although the score can be super helpful. But taking a little prep, doing a little bit of work around this, you can capture gaps in learning. I think kids learn how to take a timed constrained test. And yes, indeed, the colleges use them for admissions and sometimes merit money. Colleges don't care which one you take, though. So view it equally, take both. We suggest you doing a practice test cold, right? Don't work on that first test score, typically is not their best score, right? And then make a couple of decisions around that after taking a couple of tests.
I mean, to that, I'm sorry, to that point,
Yeah.
because they're viewed equally, and it may be, you're trying to use it to your best advantage, is it more of kind of having the ability to decide which tests to not only take as kind of the final version, the one that you really want to highlight? Does that make a difference? How can you use that potentially as a strategy?
Yeah, no, this is so true. So, we recommend that kids just not take 10 of these, right? On average, you would get a very typical score after about the third real test that you're sitting for at a test center or a high school. But it is true that leveraging those exams can garner significant money from the financial award letters that you will receive. For some majors, it's just required. For some schools, they say they're test optional, but on their websites, they'll say they're test preferred. So really understand that we see the trend in admissions that if you assume these tests don't matter, that you're closing the doors on your own opportunities unnecessarily. And so here is really the end. Uh, Thank you so much for, inviting me on and talking a little bit about what we see as the micro trends, things that have changed in the last couple of years and where we see this going. The ACT just was announced that they're also gonna go to a digital format, a shorter format. They more to come on that. We'll know a little bit more the first of the year. So definitely those would be reasons that you would want to sign up for some of the free content that we offer through that family newsletter. You can keep up on the tips and things that are changing. Also, consider the opportunity. If you have any further questions, reach out to Bob, and I'm happy to offer any family another time to talk over Zoom. We can go over family-specific questions. Junior year, sophomore year, sometimes freshman year in high school would be the most opportune times to give yourself a little bit more runway and have a deeper conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. We really appreciate that. And of course, thanks to everyone that is attending. We really hope that we answer a lot of key questions in your minds, at least get the questions and the thought process started. As Heidi mentioned, certainly reach out to your planners. If you're new to the center and you want to explore the conversation further, feel free to contact us. We're happy to offer a 30 to 60-minute consultation just to explore the particular questions, the concerns around your college planning goals, and really how that fits together with some of your other financial planning concerns as well. You can do so, of course, by going to my email, also centerfinplan.com. You can actually scan each of the QR codes now that you'll see on the screen to go to those pages and links, including how to contact Heidi through College Inside Track. If you're not following, feel free to please look at our blog, centerfinplan.com, our money-centered blog with a lot of content, not just around college planning, but financial planning topics across the board. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter that comes out. So lots of content, upcoming events and educational events like this. You can find them there. And with that, we want to thank you again for your participation and attending, and hope you enjoy a wonderful rest of the fall and a great end of the year. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.